Hi guys, I'm Al from applepepper.com. It's November 26th, and this week it got cold enough to totally kill my pepper plants. That's 5 weeks later than the average in my area in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Finally though, I can get this box winterized and show you, if you have a sub-irrigated planter or a raised bed or a tote, what you could do in a freezing area to prepare for the winter and extend the life of those devices. Now, you could just completely do nothing, and I've done that, but I'm going to show you some special steps that you could take that would just help out a little bit. So let's get in here first on this bed, and I'm going to get it prepped.
In your sub-irrigated containers, just as with any other garden, you want to cut up the dead plants, but I'm not going to leave them in place. I'm not going to just clip them and let them decompose like some might do with a conventional garden. I want to take that material out. I'm going to use it, but I'm not using it in this spot. I'm not doing any crop rotation, and I don't want there to be old plant material that's harboring disease as I'm going into the next growing season. I also, of course, want to shake off all the potting mix off of the roots, and I'm even pulling out the bulk of the root ball as well, taking that out of there, and that gives me an opportunity to then come in and fluff up the soil and have it all nice and ready for the next year. Plant clippings are pretty high in nitrogen, so I'm going to shred them up and put them into my tumbling composter. All this root mass is great for your vermicomposting. Worms love this stuff, so I'm going to throw them into my worm bin.
Just look at this. Living inside of this box, we actually have some little red wigglers. That's pretty cool, because as you're trying to clear out all the roots, you know you're leaving little ones behind. And if you actually have some kind of red worms in here, they'll go in, they'll clean out those roots, and they'll improve the pore spacing in your mix, and they'll do some tremendous things to help out with your plants growing. It was at least a decent enough environment for little worms to be able to survive inside of this mix. So, in particular, if you're in an area that doesn't get freezing weather, it's going to be a lot easier for you to sustain a better population of worms inside one of these. Well, I have the box all cleaned out, and now this is where I can cover it with a tarp, and that's going to keep out all the excessive moisture from snow and rains that are going to come through the winter. If the bottom of this at the overflow tube freezes over, then once that's blocked up with ice, this could start to fill up all the way to the top and just be completely filled with ice. And I definitely don't want that to happen. So this year, I'm gonna, rather than being lazy, I'm gonna actually take that step of covering it up for the winter. I had a couple of holes in the tarp, and I didn't want the water to just puddle up and all seep into the bed anyways. So to deal with that, I put a couple of buckets in the center to create a nice slope, which would encourage the water and any snow that melts to just drain and slide right off. And I think that's going to be pretty effective at keeping out excessive moisture through the winter months. With larger sub-irrigated beds and planters, there is some water that is going to be left in the bottom of the reservoir. But remember, when we set this up, we allowed a nice gap of air in there, and as water freezes and expands, there's somewhere for it to go. So although you could try engineering a drain plug, or maybe even try some sort of a siphoning device, I personally don't really concern myself with that for my larger containers. I just take these basic steps, and that's good enough for me. But with smaller containers, such as sub-irrigated totes, you do have an extra step that you could choose to take just to be extra safe and to try to prolong the life of the device even more. Doing this may help out when you get those hard freezes in the winter. We're going to drain out these containers. Now, they can be a little bit heavy, so be careful. And of course, watch that you don't break these. The plastic can be pretty brittle. Polypropylene is very prone to fracturing, so you might want to do this on a warm day after they've been in the sun. That at least helps to reduce that brittleness. But once you get that water draining out, you can just move on to the next one. And
then you can even raise them a little bit higher to get as much water drained out as possible. And then you're able to go back to the traditional step of just using a tarp like we've done on the other box. But there is actually something else you can do too if you want. Let me show you.
Besides using a tarp, have you ever seen these big contracting bags? You can take one of these contracting bags, split it in half, and let me show you how you could cover 1 or 2 totes if you only have a couple that you want to cover and you don't want to use a big tarp.
I've wedged the bag in place, kind of clipped it, and it seems like it's holding pretty well. Then on this end here, I took the 2 outer flaps, tied them up, and the middle flap I pulled through and covered up the fill tube.
If you're able to take a little bit of time in the late fall and you can cover up your SIP totes, your raised beds, your boxes, that is beneficial, especially going into a freezing winter. You can prevent that expansion and contraction cycle of the ice from overwhelming the box or the tote. And that becomes primarily an issue not when there's a little bit of water at the bottom, but whenever that overflow tube has freezed over and it's completely filled up with water. Once it's completely filled up, now you've got this big block of ice. And then think too of the benefit of not having this thing frozen over solid with ice. If you want to get a nice early start on your garden in the spring, these things won't be waiting for a period of weeks for them to finish thawing out, just so you can get them prepped and get them ready for a spring planting. Instead, all you have to do is uncover them and let them warm up in the sun, and you're ready to start putting in those springtime crops. Something that several viewers have mentioned is they've questioned whether or not this is really a self-watering system in the first place. In the commercial industry, they're calling them self-watering, but 99% of the time, what that really means that they're getting at is they have a water reservoir, they can hold extra water, which then helps to keep those plants sustained for a longer period of time. And they just take that term, self-watering, and they run with it. I don't really think that's a big deal. Who really cares as long as you understand what the system is and how it's working? Now, at the same time, that doesn't mean you can't convert a system like this to be truly self-watering. You have all the framework in place, and all that you have to do is integrate a float valve directly into some sort of a water line, and now you have something that is fully automated as long as you have a water source available, which could be stored rainwater in a massive rain barrel, or you can even have it directly hooked up to your garden hose. For my needs, I'm very satisfied with these systems working just the way they are. It's very simple and easy to handle, but you absolutely can put a float valve in one of these. My recommendation is to make a small sub box. Maybe you could have like a little plastic tote or container. That little float valve can be connected to the water source on one end, and then on the other end it can be connected to your planter or planters, which could all be, you could string them all together, connecting them with multiple hoses. If I was going to do one of these, I would build a small box right to the side of it, get the height and the elevation all set just right, and then you have this box that's easily serviceable. You can easily tweak the height of it. You can disconnect it and take it inside for the winter. That way you protect it from freezing cycles. So yes, this can be truly self-watering, and it's not that hard to take this system and do that with it. Alright guys, that's it for this third installment of an update on my sub-irrigated bed. You've seen from the beginning of construction to the end of season, and I'll show you some things that you can do starting into the new season after you've already used one of these to be able to keep them functioning well. I know for some of you guys, you're just getting into your season on the opposite side of the world from where I am. I hope that you have excellent success if you're trying one of these designs and adapting it to your garden. I hope that it works really well for you as it has for me for years now. Thanks very much for watching the video. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and as always, happy gardening.